Welcome one and all. This is a session on communication research. We very well know that other than our students of PGJMC and MAJMC, people in large number are joining us. And we are thankful and we respect that you decide to give your time to sessions of IGNOU. So today's session will be on communication research. A number of you would be wondering why we call it communication research and why not media research or mass media research. In my previous lectures, I have told about what communication is and how it is an umbrella term under which media, under which source, receiver, audiences, everything else gets encompassed. That is precisely the reason why we don't call it just media research, because media is one component of communication research. The way media has been diversifying over the years, the way technology has been assisting media in doing this, and the way audiences are finding their choices, it has all melted down to the umbrella term of communication, which has various forms, various means, and various things communicate. So hence we talk about communication research and not media research. So to introduce this, I would like to introduce research as a necessary evil. And why do I call it a necessary evil? In your school, everybody must have studied about friction being a necessary evil. But here, research is one necessary evil. And that is because in today's growing markets, we all know how the markets are growing in size and how big data has come in the foray on the forefront to make decisions related to marketing, related to economics, related to how things will be given to the societies, how interactions will happen in the societies, and how communications reacts to communities. So basically, research is something which is focused in all areas of life. In fact, you and me in our daily lives also keep researching. We research on things like which is the best concern to work with, which is the best product to buy, which is the best decision to take, which banking sector should you get into, where should you invest your monies, so on and so forth. So various kinds of researches we keep doing on and off, but we just don't realize that this is research. So research today is a necessary evil which has found its space not only in the academic world but also in the industry. It's only because of research that one media channel is able to one-up another, or one newspaper is able to circulate more number of copies as compared to others. So ideally, we cannot do without research. To a number of students, research appears as a subject which is more gross and grave. It is something which is more in-depth, and people usually say that they do not understand it, despite the fact that they do research in everyday lives. So today, we will try and keep it as simple as possible, give you an idea of how communication research has come up, where it has found its bearings from, and how it has proceeded to take the center stage today. So, when we talk about the uses of research, research basically is used in advertising, journalism, films, everywhere that you can think of. So when we say advertising, we are talking of a certain brand. We are talking of the communication that this brand is making with its audience, the way it is studying its market, and the way a certain market gets impacted by the communication that is made to them. Now, we all know that everything that is told by means of copy of an advertising is not true. Nevertheless, they try and influence the minds of the people in such a manner that people get more invested into that communication, such that they make a purchase decision which will help them gain the monies for advertising. Because once you buy a product or a service, the advertising becomes successful. So research has a huge role to play in advertising. It tells the marketer or a brand where to invest money, how well is the competition doing as against it, what is it that the audiences want, what is it that the kind of product the audiences are looking at, and what are the changes in the needs of the audience. So what people usually do is you create need, you fulfill that need, and then you tell the people that you are the one who fulfilled it. And hence the need of research in advertising. Now, if we talk about journalism, we all know a number of times media has been credited with good journalistic stories. At other times it has been criticized, and more often criticized, because journalism is something which will automatically require a lot of research. You cannot present all aspects of a news story until you have done some background research and until you have studied what goes in the making of the story. So ideally, journalism is one area, one aspect which makes use of research in a brilliant manner and in a different manner too. And then films. Films, people say, and we all believe, that they mirror our society. It is important for a filmmaker to study how a society reacts to various situations, to various contexts, and then what is it that comes out of it. So that crisp message which gets conveyed either in the form of a documentary or in the form of a fiction, ideally, is what comprises a film. So in order to get your message across succinctly and without any kind of a noise, by noise I mean mental noise, anything which interferes with the originality of the message, there we require research. So all filmmakers indiscriminately do good research. The better the research, the better the product, the better the movie. So this is a necessary tool that helps you look for answers, be it business, like I just spoke about advertising, be it journalism, and journalism also is a big business, we all understand that, or be it films. Everywhere, wherever business aspect is involved, we require research. Also in academics, because we study society, we study psychology, we study why people behave or react in a certain manner. It is important for us to figure out what are those important factors that lead people to behaving in a certain manner. We will study about these when we talk about the phases of research. So why else research? Research is needed in decision-making situations. Like I just told you, I was discussing about advertising. Whenever a certain brand holds a certain kind of a research, they are able to decide what is the kind of situation that exists first and foremost. Then what is it which is their weakness and what is it which is their strength? Based on their strengths and weaknesses, they formulate, they chart out a plan on which to act. So that will help them decide whether to put their monies into advertising or marketing or event management or something else. So what is it that they should do? How should they formulate their communication for their audiences in a manner that it brings out maximum output? So such decisions are made only on the basis of research. Then to describe the media. Like when we talk about describing the media, and in case you have been in touch with the academic research that goes around in mass communication, you would know that the latest media these days that we talk about is the social media. You talk about Facebook, you talked about Insta, you talked about LinkedIn, you talk about Twitter. All these forms of media basically are different from each other and yet highly interconnected. So media research helps you to devise ways and means and parameters of describing this media. How does this media behave? What does this media take? What kind of content does this medium produce? Or why is this different from the other kinds of media that exist? So ideally this kind of research enables you to describe the medium and then to analyze media effects on consumers. After the First World War, we would discuss when we study the phases, that the media became more limited in terms of its effects. So ideally, certain kind of effects came into light when Harold Laswell talked about his model of who says what to whom and with what effect. And that was the first time that effect research started finding some grounding in the field of academic media research. So the research is able to analyze what kind of an effect does the media have on its consumers, which was very important to gauge because it would not only decide whether the consumers accept the media and its content, it will also decide whether that kind of a medium will be successful in the plethora of media that are available to the consumers today. Then it helps you to understand audience behavior. A lot of research is always done, be it for the industry or be it for the academia, on the nature of the audiences. What are the expectations of the audiences? What are the media habits of audiences? What is it that the audience wants? How does it behave when it is in, when it is engaged with a certain media content, when it is inscribing and internalizing that content, whether it agrees or disagrees or rejects a certain media content. So we need to understand the audience behavior in order to ensure that we are able to produce successful content. So there again, we require research. And now what I was talking about, the research phases. When I talk about the research phases, there are 4 phases that we have divided communication research in. The first and foremost is researching about the medium. Like, say for example, internet as a medium. We need to understand this medium from various points of view. Like, all those people who become members of communities on the social media try and portray their display pictures, their profile photos in a certain manner. So they try to give out a certain lookout to the world, which may not be real, but which is how they would like the world to see them. So ideally, what kind of a medium is this? How do you interact with this medium? How is this medium different from, say for example, television or film or radio or newspaper or any other traditional medium that you can think of? And then what is it that is expected from this medium? How is the content different as compared to other media? So all these phases together describe the medium. Then we come to the uses and users of the medium. This again, I will take you back to the audience research. When we say the users and uses of the medium, it helps you decide whether the audiences are putting media to a certain kind of use only, or whether they are getting onto the secondary uses. Say for example, are they limiting themselves to only entertainment, or are they also using it for information? Are they also using it for education, the way we are making use of Facebook for education today? So ideally, what are these users like? What are their media habits? How do they interact with the medium? All these things together and various other aspects which I cannot name here, all come under uses and users of the medium. And then the third phase of research in communication talks about the effects of the medium. Now, earlier on, we used to talk about the hypodermic needle theory or the stimulus response theory. So until the First World War, it was thought that media is very strong, it is all prevalent, and whatever it will want will happen. In sense that if it wants the audiences to react to its content in a certain manner, the audiences are powerless and they are not in a position to resist any kind of change that media tries to introduce. This is what the hypodermic needle theory said, and the entire mirage got broken when the effect research came into being. Why? Because this was the time, like I just named, the Harold Lasswell's model, which was propounded in around 1949, and it spoke about the effects of our interaction with media. So in such kind of a scenario, how do the people handle the medium, and what kind of effect gets created due to interaction with the content? So ideally, this is another research phase which was later on added to the other research phases. And then of course, how can this medium be improved? Now we have seen what this medium is like. We have seen how audiences interact with this medium. We've also seen what kind of effects does a certain medium have on a certain section of the audience. By effects research, just to make it clearer, I would give an example of the violence index in children. Often we hear and we see that children around us have greater screen times these days. By screen time, I mean any kind of interaction that they do with either their tabs or laptops or computer terminals or television in any form, or PlayStations. So ideally, when they are interacting more with television, say for example, And when we know that there are a greater number of violent programs or violent games that they play, how is the violence index rising in children over the years? This is an example of effect. Why? Because the result of overviewing violent programs has been, in the form of greater, what should we say, greater ideas of violence or greater violent reactions by the audiences. This is the effect of the medium on the audiences, one section of them. Similarly, how can the medium be improved? That is another question, because the audience's reaction has been one thing, the medium has been designed in a certain manner, and the users are being affected in a certain way. So what should we do in order to improve upon these media? You often would see that in WhatsApp, every time a new feature gets added, or earlier the Facebook did not have a Facebook Live, and now because we have a Facebook Live, here we are interacting with you. So ideally, how can the medium be made better is also a major part of media and communication research. This was another phase. Now, another thing that got added to it was after the economies opened up and after greater consolidation and privatization happened, and we all know companies started getting consolidated in sense that they would ascertain which are the areas in which they should invest their monies so as to make affect the economy and to strengthen their basic economy. So ideally, this phase, the fifth phase, got added to media research later, which is how can the medium make money? Monetizing models are important. Like we all know that through internet, there is a certain advertising model that is proposed. So any website which gets a greater number of hits is able to monetize itself because it is able to gain more number of advertisers. So there will be advertisements which will be appearing in the side panels of your website, and through that you can monetize the website. So ideally there can be many such models. This is the most basic one that I've just mentioned. So this phase also got added to the research phases, which is that how can this medium make money? Now, another thing to understand is, though we have just spoken of these 5 research phases, what is important to know is these are not linear in nature. So, it won't happen that first you're researching only on the medium and then you go down to the users of the medium and then the effects and then on monetization. No, everything happens parallelly in fact. While you are researching on the medium and what are the features of the medium, there can be another research which would decide that based on these features, how can we monetize this? So ideally, it is not a linear model. It happens parallelly and it happens multidimensionally. Now, again to give you a brief overview, the major events that have contributed to the growth of mass media research, how these events have contributed to the, the entire periphery of communication research is important to know and understand. The first thing was the World War I. I just told you about the kind of communication theories that were doing the rounds. And after that, the limited effects of the media started getting to be seen. So once they were being seen, effects research came into being, and that is how the First World War affected communication research. Then there was a certain realization by advertisers, this was around 1950s and 1960s, that there was a greater realization amongst advertisers that research data was useful in persuading potential customers. So if you've already researched upon the kind of audiences you're trying to target, you already know what their demographic and psychographic features are, you already know what their tastes are like, what are their preferences in terms of anything, in terms of education, in terms of products, in terms of services, anything. So they realize that research will help them locate this kind of data. And once they have such kind of data, they will be able to push through their products and services in a much better manner. So this was another major event that helped in the growth of communication research. The third was rising interest of citizens in effects of media on public, especially children. Now, I just gave you an example of the rising violence index in children. We've also seen that people require to go to certain de-addiction centers because children, not people, but children particularly, they become addicted to screens. So there was a greater interest of the civic society, of the people in general, in understanding, because media had become a major part of everybody's lives by that time. So how is it that media is impacting them? Their various areas of their lives. So this was a rising interest, and again this too helped in the growth of communication research. Then there was greater intermedia and intramedia competition. In one of my previous sessions, I talked about intermedia and intramedia competitions. So there was greater intermedia competition. Newspaper would try to enhance its reach and circulation to certain sections of the society. The radio would anyways try and reach there. TV had made its mark in 1975 and 76, around the time of emergency in India. TV came to India. And then on we thought that television would largely be used for development. But it so turned out that TV became a medium of entertainment only. So there was a greater competition of who can serve those basic needs for the audiences first and best. What are those basic needs? Information, education, entertainment, and persuasion. So most of the things that all media do are under these umbrella terms. So there was a greater intermedia competition which further aided the growth of mass media research, because if you have to one up another media, you need some solid research. You need to understand why in a certain area, say for example the Hindi belts of the country, why is it that the regional press, newspapers, I will not name the brands, but there are certain newspapers that continuously grow, their circulation continues to rise, despite the fact that in the West, in the countries like US, the physical forms of newspapers have, for all practical reasons, they have disappeared. So what is it that is still, helping us grow in those areas? It's only research that can help you decide. And then if internet has to make a mark in that kind of a situation, where can it land up? And how can it substitute a newspaper or any other such traditional medium? These are all questions for researchers. So there was greater intermedia competition which aided it. And the last point, demassification. It increased the need for trend studies and image studies. Now let me first tell you what is demassification. We all know the media reaches people in multiplicity. So there are multitudes of people being reached by the same media content and by the same media at the same point of time. Facebook, for example, this session that we are taking, we don't know how many people are watching it. And in the next 24 hours, what is the kind of reach this session is going to have? But the multitude of people who are able to view this session the way it has been conducted is large. So as a part of demassification, every medium tries to figure out who is their segmented audience. So audience segmentation is called demassification. It is related to demassification in a sense that you try and cut down the masses into particular, together they are a mass. And when we try to demassify them, these are the various audience segments that we come up with. So in order to study these audience segments, there is always a greater need for trend studies. What is the trend that people like these days? Facebook is easily available on mobiles, and hence let us try and reach out to our learners and viewers on Facebook as compared to other media, maybe not TV anymore. So ideally there is an increased need for trend studies in various media and image studies. See, when I say image studies, it is basically the image that a certain medium carries for itself. Like newspaper, once upon a time people loved to belong to certain newspapers because they upheld certain values, certain kind of nationalism, which is not the case today. Today the newspaper tries to belong to the audiences. Why? Because it is only trying to sell. It is only trying to increase the ever-rising consumerism amongst the target audiences. So this is the image, this is the way image of a medium has changed over the years. What it was once upon a time and how it is being seen today. So demassification was one phenomena which it continues to go on till date, which has helped in a big way. It has helped in the growth of mass media research. Now let us discuss the types of research. When we talk about the types of research, broadly we categorize them into academic, which is also called basic research, and private or applied research. Now when we say academic research, it is more theoretical or scholarly in nature, and while being scholarly in approach, it is basically for public at large, usually done in the name of public interest. It has less strict timelines. So it isn't that you have to, because you have to launch a product within a certain span of time, say 6 months later, so you must do your research now. No, there are no strict timelines. And then of course it is less expensive because policies or brands are not dependent on them. These are called academic or basic kinds of researches. Then the other kinds are private and applied. These are basically carried out by companies, they are more application oriented. Based on such certain research, you are going to modify your product or service. If people do not like SMSs, henceforth telecom companies will stop giving you SMSs. Why? Because people don't like them, they feel irritated with them, so they will not buy your product, they will not buy your service. So they are more application oriented, 1. 2, the results are used in decision making. Whether, if polio has been eradicated from the country, do we really need to produce more polio drops? What kind of research are we doing in order to see to it that we come up with a vaccine for coronavirus? So the results are used in decision making. What kind of symptoms are the patients showing? So that will depend on this research. Then it is also the sole propriety of the sponsor. And it has specific timelines. Why the sponsor? Because the agency, the company, the organization which is getting this done is going to put the results of this research into use in order to either make their policy, or in order to formulate certain policies, or in order to modify the products or the services that they are coming across with. So, and of course, because of this, there are specific timelines. It cannot be a study which prolongs till eternity. It has to produce its results in certain timeline only. And of course, because all these things are involved, it definitely turns out to be a costly affair. Because it is also important that such kind of research should be authentic. There should not be any kind of fudging in it. And policy formulation and policy implementation is based on such kind of research, it turns out to be a costly affair. Then when we talk about journalistic research, since I am addressing either the learners of research or of journalism or those who are interested in journalism, I'd like to say that journalistic research lies somewhere in between. It is not completely academic in nature, though the initial research that you do for a story and the coverage has to be more near to the academic research or the basic research. But at the same time, journalism also sells. Newspapers and news channels also sell, media sells. So all these news media production companies will also have to do the research to see to it that what kind of content is being liked by the audiences in general and what kind of content will people reject. So journalistic research, you may say that it combines both academic as well as applied, or you may say it lies somewhere in between. So now we come to the areas of research. When we talk about the areas of research, of course, I've divided them based on the various media that we have, like the research in print media. When we talk about the print media, these are what you can see on the slide are the various areas that come under print media research. Like they like to know the readership. What is the kind of reader? Now there is a difference between readership and circulation. Circulation is the number of copies sold. Readership is when in one family comprising of 5 people, one newspaper comes. So there are 5 people reading it. Readership is 5, circulation is 1. So they try to research on the readership. What is the kind of readership that this newspaper is entertaining? Is it more towards the elderly? Is it the Hindi speaking? Is it the English speaking? Is it the people in hurry who would only like to browse through the headlines and don't have the time to read the details of an article or editorial? Who are these people? Reader profiles. Again, what I explained in readership research is also the reader profiling. When we talk about reader profiling, we also look at the socio-economic classification of families, of people. People who are buying, say for example, an upmarket English newspaper will be different socio-economically as compared to those who buy a 7 to 10 pages Hindi daily. So obviously the reader profile will be different, the content that they would ask for will be different. And the way you would serve content to them as a business will also be different. So hence this becomes an important area of research. Then item selection studies. What are the kind of items that appear in the newspaper that gain greater readership? Say for example, when we talk about readership of a newspaper, a lot of people, especially men, the researchers have found, are interested in sports. Both women and men are interested in politics. Greater number of youngsters are interested in reading the magazine sections of the papers. So ideally, what is that item selection? According to which a certain medium provides the content to its readers. Then we also have reader and non-reader studies. If I talk of an upmarket city, or if I talk of a metropolitan town like Delhi, there are certain areas in which a certain brand X of an English newspaper has been dominating for years altogether. And the number 2 in the same rank has been dominating in other areas where number 1 is unable to make a breakthrough. What is the reason? Despite the fact that both of them are English language dailies, the cost is the same. So what is it that makes a person loyal to a certain brand as opposed to another which is quite similar like to the brand that one is reading? So this is the reader non-reader studies. It decides upon the loyalty. It helps you scale those contents based on which if you make certain kind of improvisations, probably you will be able to pull across to those belts of the audiences, those sections of the audiences which so far have not been in your gamut. Then we talk of users gratification studies. Users gratification, when I took your session on theories of communication, I talked about users gratification. To tell you in brief, users gratification means what are the needs that you're satisfying by using a certain media. So users gratification, satisfaction that you derive by making use of a medium, by using that medium. So this is users gratification study. Say for example, information need. Information is a need which you would try to gratify through a newspaper or through your TV channel. So this is again an important area of research in print media. Then editor-reader comparisons. There is, when we talk about an editorial basically is what a newspaper feels about a certain, it is the opinion of a newspaper on a certain issue. So editor and reader, how does a reader feel about it? You can largely, traditionally speaking, people used to write letters to editors and they were a reflection of the feedback that the audiences would have towards the newspaper. So what is the kind of comparison that exists between, on the same issue, how is the newspaper thinking and how are the audiences reacting? Do they think differently? So when I say today newspaper tries to belong to the people, basically what newspaper is trying to do is give them what they want to get. So serve those needs which they, according to them, are the right ones. So this is another area of research in print media. Then of course circulation research. Like I said, readership is one aspect, circulation is another. So what do you do in order, what kind of communication strategies do you make? What kind of communication should you give out to the potential audiences such that they convert from another brand to your brand? And what is the kind of circulation that is existing in different pockets of the places that your newspaper is going to? Then of course newspaper management research is another important area, and though it was later on added since newspaper offices became more corporatized. So there are various things like mergers and acquisitions happening. A non-media company might be merging with a media concern and both would look after each other's interests. So it would be in the benefit of both the companies. So how does that affect the editorial sections of the newspaper? That is an important aspect. Then of course competition. That again, if one newspaper, I just gave you an elaborate example of two different newspapers existing in adjacent pockets of a metropolitan town like Delhi, and how does the competition aid to it? Then of course the HR aspects. The human resources aspects become important because there are certain guidelines that must be followed when women are working in a company, and because newspapers have become more corporatized, whether they are looking after the implementation of those guidelines, whether HR policies are in tandem with all the other corporatized organizations of the country, and whether they are at par or not, the salary structure, the other perks, etc. So HR aspects are other aspects of newspaper management research. Also in print media research is typography and makeup research. When we say typography and makeup, it is about the designing of a newspaper. That's something which is very easy to be copied. So if you come up with a lovely design of your newspaper, the other day the rival would copy it and it will be the same. But yet, typography and makeup research is important because you would like to know what makes it comfortable for the reader to read. We all know certain kind of typographical styles and sizes are used. How have they been decided upon? Have they been standardized? There have been researchers that have gone into it. There have been researchers that have gone into how people visualize the product. So ideally, typography and makeup research is also an area of research. And then of course, the journalist as a researcher. The journalist is not just covering stories. He's also researching on the society, on the polity, and how people think. How is the psychology of the audiences changing? So a journalist is also a researcher. In fact, in your courses, you would come across a unit which would exclusively talk about journalistic researchers and how they're different from academic researchers. Now, coming to research in electronic media. When we talk about electronic media, one is the ratings research. There is always a competition between various news groups, between various news channels, of which is rated better and how prime time news is able to pull on to the audiences and keep them hooked to their channels and not let them zap to another channel. So ratings research is one area. Then market studies, just like any other product, electronic media is also a product. It has to be sold to the audiences, and hence it is important to study the market. What is it that the audiences are like? What is it that they are demanding? What are their real needs? What are their felt needs? All those things are important to study. And then sales, because media is a commodity which sells not only in terms of its space as far as newspapers are concerned, and time as far as electronic media is concerned. It is also selling the advertisement. So ideally it has a two model which are getting clubbed together. So sales part becomes important, and there is sales research that is done in electronic media. Also, there is a diversification analysis. When we talk about diversification, we all know that a certain news channel or a radio channel is supposed to reach certain sections of the audiences. And these news channels and the radio channels have those research data with them. They know which are their pockets of audiences. Now, what is the kind of diversification that you're providing? Say for example, if there is a national channel, may not be covering the tribals of Chhattisgarh. But if there is a local or regional channel in that area, they would like to cover them in order to bring about some diversification. And it is always said that media, the best media is one which diversifies its content. There should be greater plurality. It is not just healthy for a democracy, it is healthy for all the communities that exist together in cohesion in any society. Then the next is content studies. Content, we know content is the most primary, the most basic things why we interact with any media, be it television, be it internet, be it radio, be it anything. So ideally content studies are also done when we are researching about electronic media, as in, say for example, what is the kind of need gratification that a certain spiritual channel provides to the elderlies. Yeah, so that can be one area of research. Also, when we say a cartoon channel, what kind of values is a certain cartoon channel propagating amongst its viewers, which are largely children? So those are some examples of content studies in electronic media. Coming to the advertising and PR research, one important aspect is copy research. Now the copy is the written part of an advertisement, if I'm talking in terms of a newspaper, or say for example the taglines, Amul Doodh Peeta Hai India. This is the copy of this ad. So now it tests if the researches that are done on advertising will greatly test the effectiveness of an ad. Because you know, whether it is a television advertisement or a newspaper advertisement, you have limited space and limited time. So you have to, it is very, very necessary that you check the effectiveness of this copy in a manner that it leads to the desired results. The desired results could be anything. It could be change in image, it could be a rise in sales volume, it could be beating the competition. A number of times you would see advertisements being designed in such a manner, in such a fashion, that they are basically meant to retort to a competing brand. So ideally, copy research in advertising is very important. It looks at the cognitive dimension 1 and the affective dimension 2. When we say cognitive, the cognitive dimension greatly deals with the intelligence of a person, and the affective dimension deals with the emotions of a person. And advertisements play on both intelligence as well as emotions. So that is copy research. And then we also have media research. Media research, as in whenever we do media planning, it is important to test and plan which kind of a medium has how much reach and what is the kind of frequency that this media has, and also the activities of the competition. So if the competition is advertising on channel X has certain kind of reach, channel X has certain kind of audiences. Are we going to create a breakthrough in that segment of the audience? If so, what is the kind of reach and frequency we are looking at? Who is the TV channel we are going to advertise with? Are the two channels also competing with each other, or should we use the same channel where the competition goes? A lot of things. So competitors' activities you keep tracking equally well, just as well as you're tracking your own, and you're keeping a record, a touch of everything that you're doing in your company. Equally well you try and track the competition's activities. So all these are the various aspects of advertising research. When I talk about public relations research, I've already explained to you what basic and applied research means. So public relations and corporate communication have basic researches which are more academic in nature and have less foundations in terms of time and are less costly affair. So those are basic researches, and applied, the characteristics I've already told you, more corporatized kind of research, more into policy formulations. Both kind of researches take place in public relations and corporate communications. They look at strategic research and the evaluatory research. So say for example, they have run a campaign, a public relations campaign for say 6 months. There would be an evaluation. Of course, there are midterm evaluatory projects that keep going on in order to see to it that if there is a scope for midterm correction, it should be made while the campaign is on. At the same time, once the campaign is done, what did we gain in terms of the output? How much did we invest in it? What is the kind of communication which we gave out to the audiences, and what kind of effect did it have? Finally, what is the output that we gained as a company? Comes under evaluation research. Strategic research studies the strategies of corporate communication, the strategies of public relations, by which we look at getting the required output. It could be anything. It will depend on the objectives that you've set for yourself. So you first set the objectives. When I'll take sessions on public relations and corporate communications, I will be discussing the campaign planning, and at that time I will tell you how this happens. But as of now, it is important to understand that strategies are based on objectives. There can be a certain objective that you're trying to meet. In order to fulfill that, there is a certain strategy that we look at. And then there is introspective research. Introspective research is when you look back at your policies, when you look back at your vision and mission, And then you decide whether or not it has to be improved, whether there is a need to do something better with it. That is introspective research. And then we have environment monitoring. Environment monitoring is very important as far as public relations is concerned. You need to study the external as well as internal environment. By internal environment, I mean the environment within an organization, whereby people decide whether or not it is conducive to bring about a change. And then the external environment, which involves the government, which involves the competition, which involves the global scenario, all those things together. So this is called environment monitoring. And then there are PR audits, communication audits, and social audits. PR, we all understand it is a specialized kind of communication. So once you've done a PR campaign or once you've carried out a certain kind of PR activity, you do perform a PR audit, which is basically to see what kind of strengths and weaknesses you had and how you've improvised upon it, or what kind of an output you gained. So also for communication audits. Communication audit is also necessarily a SWOT analysis, which will give you a scope of improvement. Which are the areas where you need to improve upon and how you can do that. And then social audits. Social audits can be of two kinds, One, an organization can do it on its own so as to see, say for example, corporate social responsibility, whether they have done activities which are in line with their mission and vision and goals which they have set not just for themselves as a profit-making body, but for the society at large. Also, social audit can be done when a certain, say for example, a government policy has been formulated, implemented. Now there will be a few people who would be from the public sphere, who would be from the common society, commoners, who would come and judge whether this, certain kind of policy has been able to do some benefit to the society or not. Say for example, Manrega scheme. So people who are experts in the area can judge whether Manrega has been good for the country or not. So also all other different kinds of health schemes that governments come out with, or there are schemes which are in support of the girl child, all those things together. So this comes under social audit. I think our time is almost up, so we would deal with the research in media effects, and the rest of it, how to conduct research, I would take up in the next session. But first, let us look at these. Research in media effects. Anti-social and pro-social effects are always there in media content. When we talk about the media content, there are the kind of deliberation, the kind of engagement you have with a media content will decide whether you will become pro-social or anti-social. So the message that you get from the media slowly creates a change in your mind, and that will help you decide whether you will be more influenced by pro-social content or by anti-social content. So this again comes under media effects. Then users gratification is something I've already explained. Agenda setting by the media, this again is a theory which I have already dealt with in my previous session on media theories. So agenda setting talks about the agenda that the media sets for the audiences and whether the audiences are happy with it. At times audiences set agenda for the media. So what is it, what kind of effect has it had on the audiences at large is studied under this. Cultivation of perceptions of social reality. Now this is something which is a great area of interest for researchers these days, because social reality has been changing for us the more we've started dealing with social media like Facebook and Instagram and all those things. So when we are trying to portray a different kind of reality for ourselves, which is not necessarily real. So cultivation of perceptions of those social reality is a major focus these days of media research. And then advertising and socialization of children. Like the more their screen time, the less is their peer group interaction, the less they go out to play. So obviously there is lesser socialization with humans. There is greater socialization with screens, but lesser socialization with human beings. All these are areas of research in media effects. Now, next slide onwards, we will come to how do we actually conduct media research, and that is something I will take up from in my next session on Tuesday. Thank you very much for joining us, and I hope you have been able to grasp all that we've been trying to tell you. In case you have queries, please post them in Google Classrooms and please get back to us on mails and all. Thank you.